Hello, Dankey Kang gang. It's Comrade Dankey here, and this is sort of a remake of one of my videos where the audio on this video of David Pakman's Why I'm Not a Socialist, it fucked up, and it wasn't loud enough, and you couldn't really hear what old DP was saying. But I feel I would be remiss if I didn't commemorate the my favorite picture of David Pakman, which of course is this one, and I laugh every time I see it. Um, he is a rough wrangler, ladies and gentlemen. He's a rough rider. Carries a big iron on his hip, and he don't take no lip. So anyway, that's David Pakman in a cowboy suit. But now let's actually get to the meat and potatoes of the guy's argument. So in the last episode of DBZ, he was talking about Venezuela, which of course Venezuela is not a perfect country. And I never claimed it was a perfect country, but it's a country where the Bolivarian government and the Chavistas are trying their best at running the country and running it well. And it's not all Nicolas Maduro's fault that the country's economy is failing. In fact, it's largely responsible to like U.S. sanctions. Uh, so, all that said, Juan Guaido is a wannabe president, nothing more, nothing less. And David Pakman, a social democrat, licks the boots of capital. But I want you to hear it from his own mouth, ladies and gentlemen.
Healthcare, for example, very doable. Large countries socialize healthcare. Education could be put into sort of the
He's talking about what kind of social democratic programs could be applied to the U.S. So he says healthcare and education.
umbrella of social welfare in the United States. That's the social democratic model that I support. One other argument from the right, which is they say it works in Sweden because Sweden is small and the US is big. That's part of why I believe that total socialism actually is not the path forward, but that
Once again, I don't understand that. Like, David Pakman is sort of like a states' rights guy when it comes to socialism. Like, he thinks socialism can work on a small scale, but if you try to apply it to a nationwide scale, it becomes authoritarian somehow. I don't really understand how that works. And if David could really explain to me the mechanism by which that operates, I'd be happy to hear it. And I'd be happy to hear of his counter proposal. How do you have a dictatorship of the proletariat or a worker-run society without a large centralized government and have it last against the inevitable onslaught of capitalist imperialism?
there are socializable components which would work absolutely fine in the United States. So to sort of give you the highlights of why I'm not a socialist and I am a social democrat, I believe
All right, folks, here are the highlights.
that a socially directed market economy that reduces income inequality and ensures a real standard of living for everybody is more realistic, and it's also more in line with human nature, which
Okay, so, but he said, what did
social
he say
democrat.
exactly?
I believe that a socially directed market economy
A socially directed market economy. So, in other words, he's trying to say, like, it's still a market economy. It's not like a socialist economy, but it's social directed. So, I don't really understand what he means by that. Like, he's trying to elevate the proletariat to the status of a bourgeoisie without actually turning them into a bourgeoisie. Of course, under the system, all places of work and means of production would still be owned by the bourgeoisie. So I don't really understand what David is trying to say by this. A socially owned market economy. That just doesn't make any sense.
that reduces income inequality and ensures a real standard of living for everybody.
But see, it doesn't. It might reduce the income inequality, David, but it won't eliminate it. Social democracy doesn't eliminate the inequality that is fundamentally there in the capitalist system.
Is more realistic, and it's also more in line with human nature.
Okay, as in terms of being realistic, what's unrealistic about a worker-run economy? What's realistic? What's unrealistic about socialism? It's been done. The Soviet Union did it to great effect. Uh, they industrialized a country within a single generation. So I mean, don't tell me that socialist economic policies are unrealistic. Uh, Meanwhile, our economists are touting this trickle down bullshit pie in the sky that we know doesn't work, but they do it anyway. So, don't lecture us about the unrealistic nature of socialist economies and socialist economic policies. Meanwhile, turn a completely deaf eye to the inadequacies and just internal instability built into the system of capital.
which it actually shows that there is distribution when it comes to any endeavor that humans get involved in. And I fundamentally, and this gets back to the real reason that I so vehemently oppose what we see going on in Venezuela and what we see and have seen in other places.
He not only opposes it, ladies and gents. He vehemently opposes it. Like he really, really opposes it. David Pakman is as passionate about his hatred of Venezuela as he is perhaps even towards his criticism of the state of Israel. Although I'll have to look more into David Pakman's take on Israel because I've heard it's not too good, but we'll have to see.
Around the world. I do not believe, because I've seen no evidence, that an egalitarian, self determining, free society will develop from an authoritarian apparatus, period.
Well, okay. Again, David keeps calling the dictatorship of the proletariat and the proletariat revolution an authoritarian apparatus. But again, I have to ask him the question: isn't the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie the one that we currently live in? Isn't that more authoritarian? Aren't more people being exploited? Because after all, the capitalist class only makes up a small percentage of the total number of the population. The proletarians vastly outnumber them. So, if anything, there's far more authoritarianism going on in a capitalist society than there are in any socialist society.
I'm willing to change my mind, so let me know your thoughts. I'm on Twitter at dpackman, and the show is on
All right, so yes, David Pakman, I have contacted you on Twitter. I've contacted you on your subreddit. Your subreddit is full of a bunch of bootlickers, fans of yours. Congratulations. They are completely unable nor unwilling to listen to reason. Uh, Apparently, to them, I'm just a dipshit tanky, and my opinion isn't worth listening to. So, yeah, take that as it may. Uh, I don't agree with social democracy for the reasons I described. Think it relies on imperialism, capitalism to prop it up. It's not sustainable like any capitalist economy, and it attempts to co-opt and placate the revolution, but doesn't really have any kind of revolutionary potential behind it. And so, while I do support social democratic politicians like AOC and Bernie Sanders and Ilhan Omar, it's only to the extent that they can pass real tangible legislation that might alleviate the burden on the working class. It's not necessarily because I want them to transform America into a social democratic society, although I would much prefer that to the current one in which we live in, this sort of fascist, ultra nationalistic, neoliberal society in which we live in now. So, yeah, anyway, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, all that yada yada yada. Thank you for listening.